All right, we're gonna just roll right into this. Hi there, Sage Candidate here with a training talk story, or more of a cautionary tale, so to speak. How I ran a 2:21 marathon at the age of 21, and I'll share with you some of my training and build up and the process kind of what it went into running. It was actually my second marathon that year, but the kind of the progression you see from working at shorter distances like 5K, 10K, half marathon to building up to that 42K, 26.2 mile distance. But also a cautionary tale in the fact that I haven't really progressed that much in my marathon career. And I think you could probably progress a lot more, especially if you started running later in life. Maybe you started marathon running at 31, maybe 41 years old. Maybe you haven't run a marathon yet, but you're interested in it, and you're interested in lowering your time by a much larger margin than I have. So yeah, I ran 2:21 at the age of 21. I eventually got down to 2:16 at the age of 26. It's only a 4-minute drop though, right? Not very good progression. And over the last 12 years of running marathons, I've only run under 2:20 6 times, and it's still hard for me to crack 2:20 in the marathon. So probably not a really good example of big marathon progression, but we have coached people at Sage Running that have gone from running their first marathon in like 4 hours to running into the low 3-hour range, almost taking an hour off their time. We've seen a lot of people with our Sage Running BQ plan run in the 3:20s or 3:10 range and then crack 3 hours, run in the 2:50s. I've seen people that have started off around 3 flat, maybe in the 2:50s, who have eventually run in the 2:40s or even the 2:30s. So that kind of progression is possible, and it is a matter of consistency over time usually, consistently higher mileage, as well as your chronological age, as well as the age you started running and the types of workouts you do. But fast forward, background for me, in high school I was a decent runner. I was never top 10 at states and cross country. There's this kid named Galen Rupp who was winning all the state titles my year in Oregon, large school division. Also had Ryan Vale, who is like a 2:11 marathoner now. But I ran 15:17 for 5K cross country. I had run the equivalent of 9:20 for 2 miles in track. The 1500 meter times, mile times weren't as good. I wasn't as speedy. I always had a longer range focus. Even in high school, I was doing 10K road races. I ran 32:05 for 10K off of 30, 40 miles a week, 50K, what is that now? That's like 60K a week. 60, 70K, 80K a week. I ran my first half marathon as a junior in high school, and I ran 1:13 and a half, and I was already reading Jack Daniel's distance running formula and all these books, and even that longer distance, it kind of clicked with me. I was like, okay, you're more slow twitch fibers. You're in it for the long haul. Like this half marathon, these marathon distances sound more like your groove, but I didn't have the sprint speed to run much faster in the 1500 and the mile. So I was already knowing going into college I was going to be a long distance guy. In college, I was recruited by Cornell a little bit, not really a top recruit. We had much faster guys on the team who had fast track times at least. And I slowly built up my mileage. Had a disastrous freshman year. When I was 18, 19 years old, I was low on iron. I gained the freshman 20 pounds. That's like, 12 kilograms of fat, just fat from eating too much pizza and milkshakes and waffles, actually, Belgian-style waffles. I wasn't vegan back then. And all-you-could-eat dining halls, what can I say, ice cream. And I regressed my freshman year. 18, 19 years old, I regressed. By the time I was 20, my sophomore year in college at Cornell University, we were a high mileage program. I started running 100 miles a week, 160K a week. We had like 12 guys on the team running this consistent 100 miles a week, at least in the summer before cross country season. We'd be putting in big aerobic base. We'd be doing a lot of workouts like 8 to 10 times 1 kilometer, 3 times 8 minutes, lactate threshold, critical velocity. We do up-tempo runs, 8 to 10 miles. Well, actually, they're more like 6 to 8 miles usually. So 10K to 15K at what we'd progress down from sub 6-minute mile pace down to 5-10 mile pace. What is that in kilometers? Like 345 to 310 per kilometer pace. It would be you'd speed up as you did this 10 to 15K progression run. Up tempo is what we call it at Sage Running now. But it would be those would build strength. We do 2-hour long runs, right? So we had this foundation where we were doing that. We were racing 8K to 10K cross country, 5-mile races, 6.2-mile races. Loved cross country in the fall. In the winter, we were hitting up the track, doing 20 by 200, 20 by 400, more kilometer repeats, even 5 to 6 times 1 mile repeats, and sprinkling in 5K and 10K races. So that was the foundation the year before. Next year, my junior year, I was able to build on that foundation even more. And I was 20, 21 years old, convinced my coach, Robert Rojo Johnson, who co-founded the website letsrun.com, that I would try to qualify for the Olympic trials that year, 2007. The standard was only 2:22 back then. You had to crack 2:22 in the marathon to make the US Olympic trials for 2008, which was actually held in the fall of 2007. So I had to do it when I was 21 years old, and I had just turned 21 years old. I said, Rojo, Coach Johnson, let me run a marathon. And he kind of argued with me, but I persuaded him I was going to do it. So between outdoor track, or actually my first marathon I did was Houston that year in 2007, and I missed the trials by 20 seconds. I ran 2:22:20 in my first debut marathon, hit the wall really hard the last 10K, learned my lesson. But I did that between cross country and outdoor track, or indoor track actually, because we had indoor track in the winter, but I didn't really run it that year. So I was discouraged, but I was like, I'm gonna try again after outdoor track season ends in the spring. And so I had a whole outdoor track season, still running decent volume, 80 miles a week, 70, 80 miles a week. I was at 110K, 120K a week. And racing, 5K, I got my 5K down to 14:35 that year. I ran the 10K at conference, the Ivy League conference. I ran a 30-40 10K. And it was a tactical race, so it was really tactical. We ran like a 440 last mile, 1,600 meters, 440 split near the end there. And so probably could have time trialed to maybe a 30-20 type of 10K that year, but definitely had a 10K PR, 5K PR. And I targeted the Grandma's Marathon in Duluth, Minnesota that summer because it was after track season ended. We had conference there in May. I had like 5 weeks after that 10K to get in marathon shape. And it was really just a matter of what we call extension, right? I had the 10K speed. I had this foundation of miles, not super high mileage, but I knew I had to extend it to get more endurance. And I knew I'd missed my time, the 2:22 by 20 seconds. So I needed more strength. Especially back then at the young age that I was. So it was a matter of getting my mileage back up to 120 miles a week, 110 miles per week, so it's like 200K a week for 3 weeks in there, and then doing some pretty hard 2-hour long runs, 2.5-hour long runs. Did some hilly ones, and also a 2 times 5 miles, 2 times 8K workout, slightly faster than marathon pace. It was like 10 seconds a mile, 6 seconds per kilometer faster than the goal marathon pace, which to crack 2:22 is 5:25 per mile, right? It was like 3:22 per kilometer, I believe about. So I knew that going in. Show up on race day, Grandma's Marathon, Duluth, Minnesota, 2007. It's a hot day. It's kind of hot and humid. They got these different color flags for warning people on like how hot it's going to be and how much you have to drink. It was a black flag day, which was the worst color, of most extreme heat warning type of thing. I think it was probably around 70 degrees. I think maybe around 65, 70 degrees Fahrenheit at the start, and it got up to in the 70s that day. And the sun, it was sunny, it was kind of humid. I think there's a little bit of a headwind. Great course though. I love Grandma's Marathon, Duluth, Minnesota, but showed up there. It was so hot. I was like, I'm just gonna run shirtless. I'm not gonna wear my college singlet. I don't have a sponsor at the time. Wasn't a professional. And that actually was important because I ended up getting 10th place overall and turning down the prize money. But yeah, we start off, and I know I have to pace myself. I have to take in fluids well. I have to even split this race almost perfectly, and that's what I did. I ran like 1:10:30 for the first half, and then I came back in a little over 1:11. But it's probably my most even split marathon that I've ever run in my life. And it was a hot day, and I was just drinking fluids and splashing water on my head. Only got the time, the Olympic trials standard, by 17 seconds to spare. Ran 2:21:43. One of the most proud marathon races of my life, though, because I had that Olympic trials goal I got the qualifier with only 17 seconds to spare. I threw up on the finish line, had to be carted away to the medical tent in a wheelchair. It was really one of the best moments in running, in my whole running career, and one of the best marathons I ever ran, probably maybe the best. You know, my PR was good, but I was probably in 2:15 shape when I ran my PR. So execution with the pressure on, being the youngest to qualify for Olympic trials in 2007, and to run 2:21 at the age of 21, still a tough time for me to run, sad to say, many years later, 12 years later, right? But I think it just goes to show that you could progress in the marathon probably a lot more than I have and ever did, because you're probably not running 100 miles a week or 160K a week when you're 20 years old. Maybe some of you are, I don't know. You probably weren't running half marathons really competitively when you were in high school like I was, and focusing so hard on running a bunch of marathons all in a row. So yeah, maybe you don't have that collegiate 5K, 10K track background. That's okay. That's better. That actually shows, I think, that you probably have more untapped potential, because when you start increasing your mileage, and we found this with a lot of runners we've coached, a lot of runners we've guided to Boston qualifying marathon times, sub 3-hour times, is that when you start getting up to 100K a week, 60 miles a week in volume, maybe even a little bit higher, maybe some people have to push to 80 miles a week, right? You start getting a lot of strength and aerobic benefits. Now, you can't get injured, you can't get an overuse injury, you can't get sick, you got to train smart still, but usually if you've been running lower mileage and then all of a sudden you've been able to hold higher mileage, especially for several months, 6 months, several years, you start really, it pays dividends a lot in a road marathon and ultra marathons as well. But you get that strength, and it's all about that aerobic base, that muscular strength, and that efficiency that you get from running long and spending a lot of time on your feet. But you have to still sprinkle in good mechanics, sprinkle in a lot of up-tempo runs, lactate threshold works, long track workouts like 8 to 10 times a kilometer, right? Doing even like 2K repeats or mile repeats, 1600 meter repeats, as well as maybe even some shorter stuff, hill work, hill sprints, keeping those strides and mechanics well. But then at the other end of the spectrum, working on those long runs and working on some high quality long runs where you've been sprinkling in faster than marathon pace, maybe closer to half marathon pace, as well as touching on 5K, 10K pace. So you've got, those different notches. And we've covered this in a lot of my marathon training videos, that type of progression. But it's really the consistent high mileage over time, and as you age, hopefully you get stronger. And even if you're much older than me, you might be in your 40s or 50s, you could still be knocking out those marathon PRs and that type of progression, or doing well in your age group, or running a relative faster time than you were when you were younger. But if you're a young whippersnapper and you're looking to move up, that was the kind of progression that we were looking at, is just being in the game long term, staying consistent, staying healthy, but still having to build that aerobic base, that mileage base, and doing those longer workouts so that you don't bonk in the marathon. You could be consistent with your half split and your full split, and being able to get to the point where, if your half marathon PR, if you double your half marathon PR and add 5 minutes, that could be your marathon type of potential. Most people never get there, but say if you run 130 in the half, or let's say you run 125 in the half, you should be looking at, I could crack 3 hours, right? 125 half marathon PR means that you could come back and maybe run 2 128s, 129s back to back and hopefully crack 3 hours, right? If you double your half time, 125 doubled is a 250, add 5 minutes, maybe you could even hit 255, right? But you should definitely be looking at sub 3 if you get that strength, and that usually comes with high mileage. Some people, you might not be able to do it. Maybe you're more fast twitch muscle fibers than slow twitch, but if you don't get injured, you don't get an overuse injury, you eat healthy, you sleep enough, you get a good training mix, you're not overtrained, but you get a good stimulus, you should have that aerobic efficiency to be able to have extension, right? Extension, and then endurance for the long haul. Thanks so much for following along on here. Again, check out our training plans at sagerunning.com. We got plans for any surface, any distance, but we've got our BQ marathon plan, we got our very advanced marathon plan, we've got our beginner marathon plans. We got you covered. Thank you again. Thanks for subscribing on here. Share us on social media. Like this if you like these types of videos. Comment below with your marathon goals. We like to hear what your goals are, what your progression has been, what your experience is. Be sure to share that. Thanks again. Stay tuned for more.